Back in the day, my grandpa used to go to the nearby town from his village for various purposes, leaving early morning and returning by night. The town was about 15 kilometers from the village, and then the rural areas were not much electrified. Through the outskirts and the fields, it got difficult to see the path and reach village after it got dark. Being a relatively rich man, he had helped many fellow villagers. One such person was Shankar, a farmer, who owed a huge debt to my grandpa. Grandpa had lent him a large sum of money for the marriage of his only daughter, and at a time of dire need. As such, he respected and revered my grandpa with a lot of gratitude. One day, Grandpa got very, very late while coming back. He couldn't see the road and lost his way. It being the rainy season, he was finding it difficult to reach the village through the puddles. After toying with the dark for a while, Grandpa was getting very worried when a familiar voice called him from behind. It was Shankar with a lamp in his hand. Shankar immediately told Grandpa to start walking, as he used the lamp from behind to show the path. He strictly told Grandpa not to look back. Not giving it much thought, Grandpa started walking. Throughout the path he conversed with Shankar, asking how his daughter was doing and how his crops were coming around. They discussed the roads and the rains and the village, and not once did my grandpa looked back. Soon, they arrived at the brink of the houses. Shankar left saying he couldn't go any further inside as he had someplace else to go. Grandpa went on by himself and kept walking until he observed an assembly of people standing, discussing something. When they told him what they were discussing about, Grandpa froze. Shankar had passed away that day. It wasn't someone who had shown him the path. It was something. Shankar had returned from death to acknowledge his debt and provide help to Grandpa when he needed it. I am not someone who gets easily scared to walk down a dark lane or stay alone at home, but that night, I was terrified. Me and two of my girlfriends were on our all-girls vacation in Goa. It was about 4 a.m. and we were getting back to the hotel. The two of them had been drinking, and being a non-drinker, I was made to drive. One of my friends was sleeping in the back seat, and the other was checking her phone for the directions using the maps. Even though I was sure that I knew the way back to the hotel, we decided to look up the directions to a landmark restaurant next to our hotel. It was pouring since it was just the start of the monsoons, and pitch dark since the road was pretty secluded. I kept driving, ignoring the instructions coming from the navigation app, since I was confident I knew the way, when I heard voice from the phone saying, "You have crossed your destination." Not possible, I thought. I took this very same route in the morning, and I can never go wrong with roads. But my friend, who was up and alarmed at this declaration, insisted we follow the instructions and not take such a risk, since it is too late to get help if we get lost. So I complied and started following the instruction by the app. Now we were driving in the opposite direction. In my head, I knew this was wrong. The app said in 20 meters, your destination will be to your right. 10 meters. 3 meters. Before we knew it, we were in a dark and thin lane with no lights, minimum visibility due pouring rains, and no chance, absolutely no chance of making a U-turn to return. As the navigation app declared, "You have reached. Your destination is to your right." Both of us turned to our right, staring with pale white faces at an old white church which was surrounded by what looked like remains of a garden with large trees with no traces of leaves or life. This in no way was what we were expecting our destination to be. Our destination was a lively restaurant with loud music and cute waiters. This looked like a place they shot horror movies in. Without saying a word, I switched to the reverse gear and backed the car up boot first as fast I could. For the next 5 minutes, the same voice kept repeating, "You have crossed your destination," multiple times while we were trying to refresh our search. I drove with no regard for the maddening rain, the speed breakers, or the 100 potholes that we crossed. I kept driving with my eyes fixated on the road and struggling to avoid the habituated peek into the rear view mirror. Only when we entered our room that I was relieved. Now that I think of it, it could be due to bad network or wrongly pinned GPS location, but at that moment it scared the life out of me. This is not a conventional ghost story. It has a paranormal entity involved in it, but it turned out to be a noble one, as I found out. It was back in 1996, November 17th, when I was 21. I was on my way home to Harnai to visit my grandparents' house in Konkan region. I had left Mumbai late in the afternoon and had a flat tire on way, so was delayed unexpectedly. Harnai is a famous beach village in Konkan. There are 2 routes to go to Harnai, one via Khed, Dapoli, where you take NH3 up to Barananaka, and other via Goregaon Ambet Mandangad Kelshi, Anjarli, where you leave NH3 at Tole, a village, not toll, and take inner route after Goregaon. This is a short but pretty deserted and lonely route in the night. As I was getting late, I took this route. It was about 11:30 p.m. when I was on outskirts of Mandangad on way to Kelshi. I was surprised to see a girl waving her hand to my car. There was a small hill on right side of the road and a house at some distance from where the girl may have popped up. Nevertheless, I stopped my car. The girl was about 15, 16 years old. Coming close to passenger side seat, she knocked on the glass. I pulled down the glass and looked at her. She was a strikingly sweet-looking girl, and there was a feeling of calmness on her face. She was wearing a salwar kameez with the dupatta wrapped around her ears to prevent the cold. I asked her what was the matter, to which she replied, "Mala anjarliala jaicha ahe, urgent ahe, sotoska. I'd need to go to Anjarli urgently. Will you drop me?" I was bored on a long drive of about 7 hours, and the delay anyway. And since Anjarli was on my way, I decided to give her the ride. At least I have found someone to talk to than just listening songs and driving. She sat on the passenger seat and we moved on. We started talking after some time. Her name, she told, was Ratna, and she had gone to see her uncle at Mandangad. She had missed the last bus that leaves at 10 in the night and had to reach Anjarli urgently, as she was in 10th and had an early morning school. I was taken aback completely and asked her how her uncle allowed her to travel alone at this hour of the day, to which she replied that she wanted to leave early, but uncle said he would drop her after dinner, and he caught up with fever suddenly, so she had no option. We kept on chatting on our way on different topics. In about an hour we had crossed Kelshi and were approaching Anjarl when she asked me to stop the car. I stopped and looked around. On my right side, there was a beach, and on left was small hill. Where was this girl going to go? She got down from the car. I asked her where she was going to, which she replied that her home was just behind the hill. I offered her to walk with her to safety of her house, to which she replied very curtly, "Nahi, ithparyantah, pude nahi, punha betin kaditari mitula, jatu." No, up till here only, not ahead. I will meet you sometime again. Go away. I noticed the change in her voice. She was pointing towards Anjarla village. Her face was motionless. I was about to say something, but she gave me such a look that I decided not to argue more with her. I got back in car and moved on. I reached my grandparents' house in another half an hour, and they both were surprised to see me reaching so late. I narrated them the whole incident and my encounter with Ratna. They both warned me not to stop there ever, as that area is known for being haunted in the night. As I didn't believe in paranormal world then, I turned deaf ear to it and went to bed. I had a couple of rest days and visited Suvarnadurga Fort, which is an island fort like Janjira and Sindhudurga. I had made few friends on my earlier visits to Harnai, and we decided to have a day trip to Anjarl Beach. After some time on beach, as we were relaxing, I saw a figure coming down the hill. It was a man of about 40 coming down on the road. He was surprised to see us, as Anjarli Beach is a very lonely one. I asked him where did he stay to, which he replied he stayed on other side of hill. Something struck my mind. That was the exact location Ratna had mentioned. I casually inquired about his family, to which he replied he had wife and 2 sons, no daughter. I asked him if there was another home nearby, to which he replied his was the only home there and rest all were fields. I asked him if he knows about a girl called Ratna staying nearby. He gave me weird look the moment I asked about her. Dada, Ratna mazi mulgi hoti, 10 varshazali geliti. Ratna was my daughter. She passed away 10 years ago. I had shock of life. I could not utter a word for few moments. Slowly I gathered myself. How is it possible that the girl I met a couple of days back was dead 10 years ago? I told him that I had dropped Ratna at that very point 2 nights back. He looked at me weirdly. I narrated him the whole story, how I picked her at Mandangad after her uncle getting ill suddenly, and her missing the last bus. He listened to it carefully and told me the other side of the story. Ratna was indeed coming for Mandangad on the night she had died. His brother was at Mandangad then, who had got ill, and Ratna had hitchhiked a ride in a car after she had missed the bus. The car had met an accident at that very spot, as the driver was tired and fell asleep while driving. He survived with multiple injuries, but Ratna had died on the spot. I was not convinced still. It was possible that the girl I was talking about was a different girl with same name, Ratna. I walked along with him to his house on other side of the hill. The moment I entered his house, I saw a girl's photograph on the wall with flower garland around it. No doubt it was the same girl whom I had met a couple of days earlier. She was the daughter of the farmer who had passed away 10 years ago. As I was standing there, suddenly a thought crossed my mind. What would have happened had I insisted on walking her to the house? How would have she reacted at that? I had met her on 17th November, and to my astonishment, her brother said that it was same day that she had met her end 10 years earlier. I had cold sweat down my spine. I inquired carefully with the family if anyone had encountered or felt her presence ever around, or if anyone had seen her like I did in last 10 years, to which everyone replied negative. I made few inquiries in Anjarle and Harnai village, as well as in Kelshi during my stay if anyone had given ride to a girl from Mandangad. I could not find a single person who had met her ever. After my vacations were over, I drove back the same road to my home. I could not separate her thoughts from my mind and tried to have clarification as much as possible. I had no doubt in my mind that the girl I had met was the farmer's daughter, as I could make it clearly from her photograph. The details she had told me about her activities on the night she died were matching perfectly with the night 10 years ago. Some questions which remained in my mind were: 1. Where was she in these 10 years? 2. What made her to come back suddenly after 10 years? 3. Of all the people, why did she meet me that day exactly 10 years after her death? 4. Why did she say, "I will meet you again"? Was I supposed to have another encounter with her? Was sure of one thing, that she didn't have any intention to hurt me or scare me. Had that been her intention, she had all the opportunity as I was with her for an hour or so. As days passed on, slowly the memories of my encounter with Ratna faded. I had joined a new job and was really busy with my office and other activities. Thad not visited Harnai for a couple of years now, though I had met my grandparents when they had visited us in Mumbai. It was very difficult for me to find vacation from office, but this time around, I managed to get a week's leave from office and decided to take a trip to Harnai. The moment I thought of trip to Harnai, Ratna's memories came rushing back. Will I meet her again this time? What if I meet her again? What should I ask her? What would she do if at all I meet her? I was not afraid and was now looking forward to the encounter. I left Mumbai late, keeping in mind to reach Mandangad by about 11 in the night, but this time there was no signs of her. I waited at that spot for 10 minutes, anticipating she would make an appearance, but no avail. Thinking that it was a chance encounter, I moved on. Another year passed, and I happened to visit to Harnai again, as my grandfather had organized a get-together of all family members at his home. My parents had left earlier, and I was supposed to join a couple of days later. I was once again on way to Harnai, leaving Mumbai late in the day. Busy with daily schedule, Ratna's thought had been out of my mind for a while now. He left NH3 at Tolafata and had reached Mandangad at about 11:30, and as I reached the same spot where I had picked her about 3 years back, I saw her again. This time, though, she was not waving down to me, but was expecting me to stop. As she approached my car, looked at my watch, and the date on it showed 17th November. She calmly opened the door of the car and got in without a word. It was the same salwar kameez she was wearing and same calm expression as it was 3 years ago. I was not scared at all at her presence, because I was sure she didn't mean to hurt me. As we moved on, she asked me, "Mikon he tula kalala ahe, biti nahi batat tula?" You know about me now, are you not scared? I told her that I was surprised to know about her, but was not scared, as I knew she didn't intend to hurt me at all. She nodded understandingly, but warned me, though, that everyone is not like her, and some are really nasty ones. I had so many questions in my mind. After my first encounter with her, I had taken keen interest in paranormal world and had read lots of stuff and met few people in this field. and now I had a paranormal entity sitting right next to me in my car. It was a situation of its own kind. I started asking her questions one after the other, and she answered all of them with detailed information. The information she gave me was so detailed that I cannot give it all here. As I had already read many books on this subject, it was confirmation of what I had read from her. She told me what exactly happens at the time of death and immediately afterwards. Asked her where she was for 10 years after her death, and our first encounter, to which she replied that she was in Bhuvarlok, in form of Sukshma Sharira, small physique, which is made up of thin air. Why did she chose me to communicate that to after 10 years? To which she replied that it was because I was the first person with whom she could communicate at subconscious level. There was some more relation between us, which she did not disclose. It is not possible for everyone to interact with a paranormal entity, and it's the other way around as well. Paranormal entities cannot communicate to everyone as well. Why could I not see her last year on my way to Harnai? She could not take a human form that night, though she was able to see me waiting for her to appear. How long would she be in this state, and would make appearances? She said her lifespan was supposed to be few more years in mortal world, and because she had died in an accident, she had to spend those remaining years before she could progress to next lok, which is Swargalok, or reborn in Pulok, which is mortal world unless she's instructed otherwise. I asked her how long was the span, but she replied she didn't know exact amount of time. What if I wanted to meet her sometime or somewhere else? She said that she had no restriction of place, but she cannot meet me frequently whenever I wanted to, as it would be interfering with the strict restrictions to which every paranormal entity is bound to, and would prolong her stay in Bhuvarlok. We had reached the spot where she had died, and she recounted the whole incident to me, how it had happened. She had died instantly after she was thrown out of car after the accident, and her head had hit a stone. We continued our conversation for some time. She had been helping people near death to get used to paranormal life after their death, as this was her assigned task. After some time, she said, "It's time for her to go now." I asked her, "Malapunha Betchil? Will you meet me again?" She replied that she can meet me anywhere, as she had said earlier, but have to be very careful to be alone, and it can be preferably after evening. Also, I have to ensure that the meetings are not frequent. I assured her that I would not want to interfere in her world, and would be glad to meet her when it is possible for her and she herself appears before me again. I got in my car and moved on. I had met her for second time. I didn't have any encounter with Ratna for a year or so after that. My dad had retired from office, and we were looking to get a new home in suburbs. We had almost finalized down on an apartment, and were about to sign a deal. After discussion with the property dealer for the price and bank regarding the loan, I came back home exhausted after a long day. I have a habit of taking a walk after dinner. As I was too tired that day, I just went to terrace of my apartment for a stroll. As I entered the terrace, there was no body there. I began walking up and down on the terrace, and as I started my third round, I saw someone standing on the other corner. I wondered who it can be, as I had the door behind me, and was certain that whoever it was didn't come that way. Walking at a normal pace, I reached over near that person, and it was none other than Ratna. She had appeared on my terrace this time. I was happy to see her again, but before said anything, she said very curtly, "Nako jaos tiagarat, tula hech sangayala ale aj, tijaga changli nahi tuzyasati." Don't go there. I came today only to tell you this. It is not a good place for you. I was startled. Why did she say that? It was a really nice apartment, and we had bargained a lot with the property dealer, and I had taken enough pain to get loan from the banks, and now this girl was putting me off. I asked her why she insisted me on not taking that apartment, but she refused to give me any details. She flatly told me that it was not good for me and my family, that's all. I could sense a definite concern and urge in her voice about stopping us to move there. That moment itself, I decided to cancel the deal. I told her I won't go there, at which point she smiled and just went away to other corner of the terrace, and as I was watching, she just mixed away with thin air and disappeared. Later on, I came to know that previous owner of the apartment had committed suicide, and prior to that, there was a murder that had occurred in that apartment. Perhaps that was the reason Ratna wanted to keep me away from there. I had few more encounters with Ranta. I asked her once if I can take a picture of her, but she refused. She had told me many details of life beyond death and different kinds of paranormal entities, and about the powerhouse we call it as God. My wife also happened to see her once before we were married. I clearly remember the date as it was 10th of September 2005. The last time we had seen her, she told me that time had come for her to move to a different life, and we won't meet again. She blessed us and left without ever coming back. To this date, I have never seen her again. I hope wherever she is, in whatever state she stays, happy. I wonder what it was between two of us that kept her bringing back again and again. I only guess that there was some sort of relation between us for sure. And when I was about 10, my mother took me to the city to see a doctor. On the way back, she took a couple wrong turns and ended up in a bad neighborhood. Frightened, she rolled down the window and asked a well-dressed but creepy-looking stranger in another car for directions. "Just follow me, ma'am," he said. "I live near there too and am just headed home." He proceeded to turn his car completely around. My mom said something about how she couldn't believe he was nice enough to go out of his way to help us, and started to turn her car and follow him. Only being a child, it didn't occur to me to question why he would have to turn around to get where he was supposedly already going. And apparently it didn't occur to my mom either. Fortunately, another man heard the exchange, warned my mom not to follow him, and gave her proper directions. Seeing this, the first man sped away. We later learned that the first fellow was trying to lead us into the seediest abandoned warehouse district in the city. Were it not for the second man, I may have never lived to see 11. I killed my twin sister. You need to understand, first of all, that having a twin can really suck, because no one can picture the two of you apart. From my life's screaming start to right now, it has always been a pair, Tara and Cleo, and I hate it so much. Just imagine having a baby sibling you never wanted who's always there, and everyone acts like you're the problem for being upset about it. And I do mean baby, and not just because I tore out of mom first. She cries when our food is wrong, i.e. when it's all touching, or when mom and dad go to work and leave us by ourselves all day. And don't get me started on when we go outside and dig for salamanders and frogs to play with. It's buckets of tears and hiccups the whole time. Sometimes, just to buy some alone time, I tell her I'm the normal one. She cries the whole day, but at least she won't bug me to do stuff. I'm serious when I tell you I needed the space because she's fucking everywhere. Unasked, uninvited, it doesn't matter. Tara will be there. A great example happened at my high school prom. After the dance, I went with my date to this lake to go do what teenagers do in dark cars. Not long after Lincoln cut off the truck, I could hear Tara breathe right by my ear. I grabbed the keys, got out of the car, and locked the truck. It trapped Lincoln inside, but it's fine. I never liked him that much anyway. Oh, and forget having any kind of pets around Tara. I've had a string of small pets over my life, and it's all ended the same. Hamsters, gerbils, cats, they all go missing. And the worst part is mom and dad never believe me when I say Tara did it. In fact, any mention of Tara makes mom start to cry, and dad yell at me even louder. I've been so sick of how it's never Tara's fault. So, like the title says, she's dead. Judge me later. Let me finish for now. I did it the night before I was supposed to go see the doctor. Dad didn't tell me it was a shrink, but I found the woman on his search history. I was freaking out. I'm 17 now, at least for a couple more hours, and can't say no to anything they want to do. So I decided I'd rather risk it. With mom passed out drunk, Tara didn't see me slip into the kitchen and grab the chef knife. Serves mom right for drinking so much these days. Asked Tara to meet me out by the lake for a birthday surprise that mom and dad would take away if they saw. Because Tara isn't very bright, she believed me and followed me out to the woods. Tara saw the knife eventually, and getting rid of her really hurt. She fought back worse than I expected, or maybe my hands shook worse than I thought would. But either way, it took an hour of fighting, crying and begging before I saw blood. And before Tara stopped twitching. Pain throbbed in my skull. I stumbled back to my house, bleeding, bumping into tree trunks. Somehow, mom woke up and she screamed when she saw the blood on my pajamas. She held a cloth to my left eye socket, begging to know where my eye was. She kept crying, so dad had to go out into the woods and get it, along with Tara. They both got stuffed into the cooler. The hospital thinks it can save my eye, but I don't want them to. Because behind that eye was Tara, a misshapen twin I learned about when I was very small, with a name I couldn't fully pronounce. I've never known a life without her, without those whispers to do things I don't want to do. But I think it's time I find out. I turn 18 in a matter of hours. If I can stall, then I can sign an AMA and keep us apart. All right, now you can judge me.